so much for being here with us today on this very cold Tuesday here in Baltimore. I just want to take a moment before we start just to acknowledge what happened in the Jewish community in Texas this past weekend, and to say how grateful we are here in the Baltimore Zionist District, as I'm sure so many of you are, and so many of you in your communities, that what happened did not turn into another tragedy in the Jewish community, and that the rabbi and his congregants were able to escape tragedy that occurred as they were being held hostage for 11 hours. So I want to say that we are grateful, and as almost nearly 700 of us sitting here today, we should really take a moment and really look into ourselves and into our communities and see what we can do as members of the BZD, as members of other organizations, to really work together to try to combat this hate, to try to combat this anti-Semitism, and work together to ensure that we are working together to make sure that this type of hate stops and really is vile in terms of what is going on in our community. So thank you so much for being here. We are thrilled to have you here once again on a Tuesday as we join together for a live virtual tour of Jewish Greece. My name is Karen Levin. For those of you who don't know, the executive director of the Baltimore Zionist District. Selfishly, I have to admit that Jacob and I were speaking about my family, my history, and I mentioned that my grandfather had moved to Greece, to Israel from Greece a very long time ago, back in the 1930s, and that's how this program really came about. And while working on this event, I know that Jacob, and he will share with you, had spoken to my dad, and they had exchanged stories and photos and pictures. And it really turns out that Jacob knew some of the Shalom family. Shalom is my maiden name, and my dad knew members of Jacob's family. And so I just wanted to give you a little bit of background on how some of our programs really come to life, and just a little bit about what we do here at the BZD to make these programs exciting and engaging, and how sometimes they just hit home for our staff, for myself. But as always, I really want to thank each of you for sharing our programs with your friends and family. You can see how much they've grown over the years, and your support, your donations. We really couldn't do what we do for the past 2 years without all of your support. Please help me welcome Jacob. If you haven't had the pleasure of joining an event with Jacob, he is definitely one of our favorites. He's a licensed tour guide in Israel and a teacher and a lecturer at the Tour Guide College in Israel. Jacob is a senior tour director and lecturer at the Geographical Society, and has visited over 98 countries and led tours in 65 countries on all 6 continents. He's fluent in 15 languages and presents in-depth discussions on Jewish history, philosophy, culture, and is deeply involved in Holocaust education. Jacob, we're so excited to have you back. I can't wait for this. Every time you teach, I feel like I'm in school all over again, but actually learning something. I love learning from you. I just want to make a quick note. If your camera is on, you do come into our programs with your cameras on. If you do have something personal that you're doing, please remember to turn your cameras off. This is not a webinar, so we are all here together. We can see you, so just a reminder that your cameras are on. Jacob, without further ado, thank you so much for being here. We're so excited. I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you so much for this wonderful introduction. Those of you who traveled with us before know that I like to take you on a tour. Less of a lecture, then we'll try to do kind of a tour that will be traveling together to this part of the world known as the Balkans, because we'll mention some neighboring countries while we are visiting Greece. So everybody knows the south eastern corner of Europe with all these countries between Italy and Turkey and all these neighboring countries as you see on the map and as you know for yourselves. Greece is a very interesting geographical unit, part of Europe, but splits into hundreds and hundreds of small islands with bays and harbors and interesting landscape. The territory, as you see, not a very large one, just about twice the size of my state. I'm talking to you now from Israel. The population is just a little over the population of Israel. The shocking figure, of course, is what happened to the Jewish community. As we can see, most of the Jews who lived in Greece on the onset of the war perished in the Holocaust, leaving us today with a small community, a little over 5,000 people live in Greece today. So we took the trip, say from Baltimore, that's where many of you are, even though I recognize some names and I'd like to welcome everybody I know before. And I was lucky to have some of you to have actually physically traveled with me. At least one lady traveled with me to Greece many years ago. So hi everybody. We'll take the trip to Athens. Greece today is a member of the European Union and is also a member, a significant fact, is a member of NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. But when we go into far back in history, into early times, we can see how it was located, and we discover that big parts of what we know as ancient Greece were actually in the area which is Asia Minor, what today we know as Turkey. Even names that you would recognize, like even Ephesus or Troy and so on, they were all in Asia Minor. Like the picture in the background behind me, I think people most associate Greece with the Parthenon, the mountain rising over Athens is the Acropolis, and that beautiful, beautiful, splendid example of traditional classic Greek architecture is located on top. Other things we associated with will be the beautiful statues, the vases, and this kind of statue we believe that typifies and resembles what they thought Athens, Athena looked like, was inside the Parthenon temple on top. Lots of other statues are exhibited now at the foothill of the Parthenon. Is a brand new, beautiful museum featuring lots and lots of the artifacts that came from there. Other architectonic features everybody knows would be the theater. Probably the earliest form of this kind of presentation was done here in Greece with dozens of such ancient theaters in various locations, along with dozens and dozens and hundreds of other temples throughout the country. We cannot ignore the architecture without mentioning the fact that some of the most typical architectonic features are recognized from early Greek architecture, which is the Doric, the Ionian, and the Corinthian capitals, the frieze, and what have you. Some of these beautiful friezes, some of them were taken and are located in many different museums around the world. This one in particular is located in London. Greece has asked for it to be returned. I don't know that it's going to happen. And don't tell anybody, but sometimes we feel that we were lucky that somebody took these marbles and located them inside the museum rather than being exposed to the elements in a city that became very, very polluted over the years. So we can still admire the authenticity, the details, whether it's the drapery and the muscles and the body descriptions of the people and the different animals and mythological creatures. No question, they're absolutely fabulous. Without going deep into history, but we have different schools. This one happens to be the Minoan schools, one of the oldest forms of Greek art, and then we have the later one, 1,000 years later, with these gorgeous, gorgeous mosaics, which really give us fantastic descriptions. Some of the beautiful pieces are located, as we know, also not only in London, but in Paris. Some of them are in Berlin. And the paintings on the vases give us really fantastic description of stories, both historical stories and mythological stories that we know from the beautiful Greek mythology. And I think you all know them. I won't have to go into detail. Other than art and architecture and theater, Greece gave birth to some of the greatest philosophers, and I mentioned them here in particular because today we're going to talk about Greece. We have to know that some of the greatest Jewish sages were very much familiar and influenced in many ways. Maybe even one of the greatest of them all, Maimonides, was very, very well versed with their teaching, with their schools of thoughts, with their beautiful philosophy. Today, we go fast forward to our times. The youngest ever rabbi is now the leader of the small Jewish community. Can you imagine? They appointed the 25 years old, and he does an incredible job. Our first encounter with the Greek stories happens to be, as you can see, in the 4th century BCE, before the Common Era, when this amazing young man, Alexander the Great, who came from Pella in Greece, in the part of Greece which we would recognize as Macedonia, he crossed and conquered big parts of the Asia Minor subcontinent and through Syria and Lebanon by way of Israel, by way of Jerusalem, into Egypt, and then, of course, further beyond, creating the largest empire the world has ever seen. Imagine, he conquered all these territories into India and what have you, but that's when we first met him. And some centuries later, some of the first Jews arrived in Greece, and they created a very special community. These are not Sephardim, they are not Ashkenazim, they are Romaniotic Jews. Probably they showed up there either the 1st or 2nd century BCE, which means they brought with them Judaics, they brought Hebrew, they adjusted and adopted to the local languages which were spoken at whatever it is that they were, and they settled in many different communities around Greece, both in the mainland and in the island. And it was only later that they merged and teamed up with the Jews who came, the Sephardi Jews that came, as we know, by the end of the 15th century. We'll talk about it, and Ashkenazi Jews who joined them later on. The Sephardi Jews came following these infamous edict of expulsion issued by these, what they call themselves, the Catholic kings, Ferdinand and Isabella. The year is 1492, and they said, you either convert to Catholicism or you leave our beloved countries. And we know half of the Jews of Spain converted and stayed behind. Some of them lived as Marranos, as conversos, as crypto Jews, and the other half left, and some of them went into Northern Europe, into Holland and Belgium and Germany and Denmark. Many of them stayed nearby in North Africa, but the vast majority moved on to the realm of the Ottoman Empire, where the Ottoman Turkish emperor was just too happy to embrace them and say, welcome to my country. And they moved and they lived in Greece, in Bulgaria, in former Yugoslavia, Italy, Turkey, and other parts. You see, Jews were always wandering. They were always either kicked out or expelled or pushed away and spread throughout, and that's how we have them all over the continent. But today we'll concentrate about the Jews who came to Greece, whether it is in the island, in particular, for example, you see this synagogue in Crete, or in the mainland. The reason I wanted to mention the synagogues in context with the Romaniotic Jews and the Sephardi Jews, they combined both traditions, the Sephardi structure of the shul, of the synagogue, and the Romaniotic one, which had them sitting in different shapes, no pews for that purpose, but in different setup. The largest Jewish community until the war, until the Holocaust, was in Salonika. Saloniki, Thessaloniki, different name, different ways to pronounce the same name. Athens became the largest Jewish community today in Greece only after the Holocaust. But for centuries, this was one of the largest Jewish communities in the world, and it was called City and Mother in Israel. When we travel now to Salonika, one of the main features associated with the Jewish story is the White Tower, built sometime in the Middle Ages. The Jews settled right around it, and it became a very prominent symbol, for whatever reason, of the Jewish community for themselves and for others. You see, even now, when you walk around from the promenade, from the different locations, everybody sees it. Lots of us like to ascend it and enjoy the beautiful view over the city, especially over the former Jewish quarter. Unfortunately, most of the Jewish quarter around the White Tower was destroyed in the big fire that broke in 1917. But even now, when we walk, we can still find the echoes of the former Jewish quarter in that area. The promenade leading to the White Tower would remind many of the people who have visited Israel and other, of course, Mediterranean cities. The city really faces to the Mediterranean, and the boardwalk, if you wish, or this promenade is very typical of these cities, and Saloniki is no different. In other locations in Saloniki, we have the ancient city walls, most recently were done in the Ottoman period, and we have, of course, lots and lots of the churches. Today, it's a very, very Christian country, but for centuries it was ruled by the Turks, and of course, the Jews as well. The Jews who settled here created a very busy community lifestyle with not only synagogues and associations, but also places where they have print shops, where they printed, whether they were religious texts. This is a machzor, Ashkenazi style, but printed in Salonika, and they had dozens and dozens of synagogues. Unfortunately, only one of them now functions as a synagogue, and even that one, I'm afraid, is not very busy. At the time, very interesting to note, by the way, if you look at this word here, shalom, some of the pictures I've incorporated into the presentation are courtesy of Karen's father, whose name is Shalom, and the last name is Shalom. So Shalom, Shalom, Shalom. And he found his last name on one of the ancient stones, which is so interesting. In his case, it's both last and first name. Look at the different newspapers they published there. This one is, of course, called Eretz Israel, as you can see. It's written in Hebrew fonts, but it's the Ladino language. Ladino, as you know, was the Jewish dialect of Spanish language spoken in Spain in 15th century, which the Jews brought with them when they left Spain. For the next few hundred years to date, practically, lots of people still speak this language. They sing it. You heard the song that welcomed us into the meeting. They loved and they cooked in this very special lifestyle, which was brought with them from Spain at the end of the 15th century. And even the Romaniotic Jews eventually learned to speak and cook the Sephardi dishes. And it's quite interesting to see these texts. They created their own style of writing Spanish in the Hebrew language. Of course, they had lots of organizations. I mentioned singing. They had their choirs. And something special happened here that affected us all to date even. A movement was born here in this city which has invoked terrible catastrophe on the Jews, and it came from within the Jewish circles. Shabbatai Tzvi, the false Messiah. I think you know very well of this person, and he has created such a rift where so many people followed him. At one point, he himself was forced by the Turkish Sultan to prove that he is Messiah or convert to Islam. He locked him up in jail and he converted to Islam. Lots of people followed him, and can you imagine, there is this cult, the Donme community. They are the followers of Shabtai Tzvi, and they even have their own synagogue or whatever prayer house, because they live like Muslims, but keeping inside very special faith and tradition as the followers of Shabtai Tzvi. We have reason to believe that even this amazing person, the creator of modern Turkey, Kemal Atatürk, who was born in Salonika, is also a descendant of these Donme, of these people, can you imagine, of Shabtai Tzvi. He is somebody who is revered very much, and we acknowledge him also in Israel, where we have streets named after him, and this monument, the founder of modern Turkey. Some other noted people who came from there will be, for example, Aroch, which you will be able to read about, and if you will be able to watch this movie, it's unbelievable. He was a boxer who survived the Holocaust in the camps, boxing with German officers and other prisoners. He was fed a little better, and he made sure to distribute the little food he got with other people in the camp, other inmates. So another person who came is somebody who the whole world now looks up to, and this is Arbelt Bourla, the chairman and chief executive of Pfizer. And if we talk about the different vaccines, we know whom to acknowledge and whom to give thanks to. He is the one who pushed for the production of the COVID-19 vaccine in a very fast manner. I mentioned the languages which were spoken. Look at this amazing dictionary, which is French, Hebrew, Greek, and the Espanol, which is the Judeo-Espanol, the Ladino language. They had their own way of dressing up their rabbis and community leaders, and many of them, as we mentioned, living under the Turkish rule, would look like many of the Turkish people. This is a very interesting picture. Can you imagine, from so many years ago, depicting Jews selling, Salonika Jews selling oranges and seeds. They had schools, they had orphanages, they had, they would march, like for example, they had the Shoemaker Association. They would march in public events. Can you imagine? Jewish Shoemaker Association. Here we have the meeting of the generations. On the right, we have mother and daughter. Obviously, the daughter on the right is changing the fashion, wearing different kind of clothes. And when we look at the picture on the left, we can see a very typical scene. I believe there are many, many people who would have similar pictures of their generations. I mentioned the fire that broke in 1917, and following the fire, there was a big wave of construction all over the city. Modiano, Eli Modiano, was a Jewish architect, and he created this beautiful, colorful marketplace. The different Jewish neighborhoods, as I mentioned, if we look at the tower, the White Tower is right here, so the Jewish neighborhoods were all built quite close to it. Can you imagine, in the Jewish neighborhood, they have Jewish firemen brigades that catered to these neighborhoods. And some people who did very, very well built some magnificent mansions. Mind you, we are talking over 100 years ago. And some of these people lived it up, more modest lifestyle, and some of them more luxurious lifestyle. This is a very interesting villa. It belonged to a family whose grandson became the president of France. Look, this is Sarkozy, and that's his mother, whose father lived in that beautiful villa, the Malat villa, which we saw. So he is also, in a way, a descendant of not just Sephardi Jews, but people from Salonika. Another family of big industrial people, the Alantini people, the Gattegno family that made a big name for themselves in many ways, the Mordech villa. So they built their Jewish hospital, and it's quite interesting. If you take a tour of Jewish Salonika, we point out to you lots and lots of sites that are associated with the former residents. Unfortunately, most of the people, as we know, of the city did not survive the Holocaust. When the war breaks, of course, Salonika is taken by the Germans, and the fact that the Jews were taken made a very big thing for the city. The Jews who lived close to the harbor actually kept the harbor. Overwhelming majority of the population of the city was Jewish. An overwhelming majority of the people who operated the harbor were Jews, which means on Shabbat, the harbor closed down. The harbor in this town, which is not in Israel, the harbor did not operate because these were the Jews who operated it. And luckily for many of them, these fine gentlemen, Abba Hushi, the mayor of Haifa, traveled there in the 30s, and he wanted to make sure that the harbor in Haifa would operate even when the Arabs here might go on strike or where things will happen. And he convinced dozens of Jewish families from Salonika to pack and move and come to Haifa. And they are the ones who really, these are the people, they're already in Haifa, and they are the ones who built and operated to a great extent the harbor in Haifa. They brought with them their special boats. Shalom's father came to the country in this manner. They brought with them some of their barges, where at that time, in the absence of cranes and what have you, they would literally, on their backs, they would unload the sacks and whatever with goods and so on into the barges and bring them to the port. And this is the port that welcomed tens of thousands subsequently of newcomers coming into the country. Today, the big modern harbor, this is Haifa now, of course, very sophisticated, very modern, very equipped, but we all acknowledge the fact that it was the Salonika Jews who created it. And here even look at an Israeli postal stamp acknowledging the relation between Haifa and Salonika, the Baha'i shrine and the port in Haifa, and the White Tower and the port in Salonika. Today, taking a walk through the former Jewish quarter, we can point out some of the houses and some of the stories, and then, of course, the Germans came. They set shop and observation position on top of the White Tower, and the White Tower, which played such an important role in their lives before the war, is featured in many of the books that were published by survivors after the war. So this part, for example, an acquaintance, Maurice Tazartes, thank God he's well and alive, he now lives in Athens. He said the passing of time, the passing of the years, an autobiography, and featuring, as you can see, other than his picture, is the White Tower. Unfortunately, this gentleman, another acquaintance, a good friend, Yaakov Handali, passed away a few years ago, a special story of a child survivor of the Holocaust. And even him, you see, he named his biography From the White Tower to the Gates of Auschwitz. And here the White Tower is featured as well. And wherever you see a book talking about Jewish history of Salonika, somehow you see the White Tower will be featured. The story of the war is quite complex. The country was occupied by three different powers. Once the British were kicked out in the 40s, so the Germans occupied where you see the color red. The Italians who kept shop there since 1912 kept the largest majority, and some parts of Greece, especially the area of Thrace, like here, we'll visit later on the area of Kavala, were annexed to nearby Bulgaria. And it's quite interesting. The Italians made sure not a single Jew was hurt. The Germans were vicious. The Bulgarians were not kind. The same people who saved the entire Jewish community of Bulgaria, unfortunately, collaborated with the Germans, and Jews were sent from these regions which were annexed to Bulgaria, Thrace and Macedonia. They were sent to their death in the Nazi concentration and death camps further up north in Europe, east and west. When the Germans came to Salonika, they created two ghettos in the area. One of them is a very interesting neighborhood. You see Baron de Hirsch. It was the generosity of the Baroness de Hirsch, which has created a neighborhood, and the ghettos were there. And soon as they moved in, you can see they rounded up the Jews. 7,000 Jews were rounded up to register in the square. And then atrocities began. They forced them, mocking them, to practice some kind of like gymnastic exercises, which the whole intention was really to disturb them. You know, by now, Jews had to wear the Stars of David, and they were given special documents to identify them as members of the Jewish community. And now comes a very tragic story. The Jews were forced to fill up a document pointing out their valuables and their monetary conditions. Jews who were lucky to have citizenship of another country, whether it was Italian or Spanish or Portuguese, were a little more comfortable, but the others were encouraged to follow the orders of the Germans, and it was done, unfortunately, by a very, very tragic person. That was Rabbi Dr. Tzvi Hirsch Koretz. He came from Galicia. They appointed a non-Sephardi rabbi because he was a great rabbi, and they liked his style, they liked his sermons, and he was welcome, and he suggested they should cooperate with the Germans. Of course, nobody has the privilege of playing what if, but the fact is that he corresponded with these two vicious people, Dieter Wyszynski and Alois Brunner. Both of them have had experience before in eliminating the Jewish communities in Slovakia and elsewhere. And when they came here, they were so vicious. Look at what they did. They forced the Jews. They suggested that the Jews are going to be sent. Of course, they didn't mention death camps. They said relocation to work. And the Jews were given special like checks, like banknotes, in Polish currency. They said you are going to Poland, and with this money you'll be able to buy their apartments. So the Jews gave them all of their money to get these totally worthless documents rounded up and marched to the train station, where many of them were sent to the death camps in Poland. If that is not bad enough, we found in the warehouse, in the storage area in the museum, in the archives, in the museum in Auschwitz, we found these train tickets, tens of thousands of train tickets. Jews were forced, to buy their trip, to pay for their voyage on the train, to ride the train. They were forced to buy this kind of train tickets. The devastation which incurred on the city once the Jews were sent They went, for example, and broke many of the beautiful marble tombstones from the cemetery to create a swimming pool for the officers. The others remained there until after the war, when some Jews came and tried to fix up and gather and restore partly what was left after the Holocaust. This is a very moving Holocaust memorial with special inscription acknowledging the fact 50,000 Jews of Salonika out of 60,000 Jews of Greece. And you can just imagine the devastation. Another memorial is in the cemetery, and another one is now located in the former train station. That was the train station from which all of these people were sent. There is today a modern Jewish museum telling us the story of the Jewish community throughout the years with artifacts. And I mentioned the synagogues, only one survived, and it's frequented more by visitors, tourists, than people who come for the worship. Another synagogue is like a museum, it's not in practice. And the people of the city would march along with the Jewish community. Today, there is a very big recognition and acknowledgement, celebrating different memorials. Still some of the survivors, here we have her visiting the train station that we saw before. Some people reach out and touch the train cars, the cattle cars. And this is the plan for a suggested Holocaust museum, which is going to be built in Saloniki. Will be a most unbelievable building, but it will be a while before it's going to take place. Here is a very special gesture. This is a non-Jewish guy, Yanis Boutaris, the mayor of Salonika a few years ago. For his election campaign, look what he opted to wear on his lapel, on his, he put like something that looks like the Jewish star, and he did it protesting the campaign run by a far-right party running for office. He said, we'll do whatever, we will not let such things happen again. And he won, and he was elected for 2 terms as mayor. So things happen. Those of you who know me know that I like to take you on a tour. So what we'll do now, we'll travel from Salonika to Athens. We could visit, of course, many places. It's a beautiful country. But I decided to pick up a few towns with a special Jewish story, Veria, Kastoria, Ioannina, till we get to Athens. This was the former Jewish quarter in Veria called Barbuta, and this is the synagogue. And it is here in this synagogue that the Jews were rounded up for 3 days before being shipped on trains to be taken to the camps. Here we have the former cemetery, which was preserved even though it's prime real estate property right in the heart of town. And again, here we have the memorials, and then again, we have the ceremonies. Kastoria is another interesting place. It's a town right on the shores of the lake, which specialized in fairs. Castor is beaver in various European languages. And the Jews became part of the fair industry. They had, of course, their synagogues, and for many, many generations, they were a big part of the fair business, which is still a very, very big thing. I know now it's politically incorrect, right? We're not supposed to endorse it and encourage it, but here we have a very moving memorial to the Jews of Kastoria, who, as you say, the Hebrew inscription says, was exterminated by the Nazi in Birkenau camp during World War, and everything took place in 2 days between the 10th and 11th of April, 1944. Unfortunately, right wing raises its ugly, ugly head every now and then, and another memorial, the other side, was damaged and desecrated. As we can see later on, this one, which we have seen the picture, is being now restored. Otherwise, it's a beautiful town, and from this beautiful town, we travel to Ioannina. Now, this town is associated more than any other place with the Romaniotic Jews. It was a stronghold of Romaniotic Jews, a beautiful, beautiful town with beautiful surroundings. Nature is absolutely gorgeous all seasons there with these beautiful bridges. The city walls lead us into a very intricate maze of lanes and streets dotted with coffee shops and everything with the flowers overlooking the water. We have the rivers there, and the city itself is absolutely spectacular with the gorges and the monasteries on the edge of the gorges. And here we come into the synagogue. Again, it's very interesting to note, here we see a ketubah from Ioannina. Very interesting to note that the Jews from Ioannina were some of the most documented Jews when it came to the deportation to be sent to Auschwitz. These pictures were taken by the Germans. They have separated the Jews into two groups, the men on one side and the women on one side, and then they were sent by trucks, loaded on trucks. By the way, they were the garbage trucks that were recruited for that purpose, to take the Jews with some of the belongings they were allowed to bring, and they were taken, as we know, to the camps. And this is a very, to me, of course, I'm sure to everybody, very moving pictures to see them on their way away from town. The setup of the Romaniotic synagogue is very different, as I mentioned earlier, because they don't sit in pews one behind the other, but facing the other. So it's quite an interesting setup. And here are the names of the 1,832 Jews of Ioannina who perished out of 2,000 who were captured. We have some remnants from the Jewish cemetery put into the synagogue, and here is the mayor of Ioannina, the first Jewish mayor who was elected to office in Greece, and he is the mayor of Ioannina. Ceremonies incorporate traditional Jewish outfits with the different ceremonies that are being held. This is a non-Jewish site, but I cannot ignore it. Traveling from one place to the other, we pass by a very magnificent place. This is Meteora, which has these beautiful monasteries on top of the cliffs of the mountains, very picturesque, very dramatic setup. So it's an interesting place. Those of you who have traveled to Greece would remember it. And if you are going to go there, make sure not to miss it. It's a very, very special place. We got to Athens, and before we spend too much time in Athens, I'd like to go to the island of Rhodes. As you see here on the map, it's so far away. It's so far away. It's 400 miles away from Athens. It's closer to Turkey. This is Turkey on this side. Yet, after being occupied by the Italians for the longest time, and where the Jews were protected, now come the Germans, and they find this beautiful, beautiful island, this bay not far from the town of Rhodes, is Lindos. It is a beautiful Greek village right next to the beach. On top is a Crusader castle. Inside the Crusader castle, a Greek temple. So everything incorporated into one, everything against the beautiful backdrop. Entering the town of Rhodes used to be, we're being told, the Colossus, like a lighthouse, which was one of the wonders, the 7 wonders of the ancient world, was right here in this town, signaling the road for boats to enter the sea. And imagine now they're going to rebuild it. This is a suggested reconstruction. They're going to rebuild it, 500 feet tall Colossus. It will be located where now we have the statues of Elaphos and Elaphina, the deer and the doe, which mark the entrance into the ancient harbor. From the ancient harbor, we see the beautiful city walls, and we'll use one of the gates and start wandering around through this maze into the old city. We see in the old city, we will see the Knights Castle, the former Crusader order after they have left Israel, they left Jerusalem, they went to Akko. From Israel, they went to Cyprus, and then they came to Rhodes, and they settled here for the longest time before they were kicked out of here as well and went into Malta. So in between the maze of this city, we're gonna see these interesting Crusader medieval structures. We'll see some Ottoman mosques because the Turks ruled here, as we know, for centuries. And at the end of the lane, we see a gate that leads us into the synagogue. Still active, and today, I'm afraid, only a few times a year, a very small Jewish community and mostly expats who would come here for the high holidays. But it's a very interesting synagogue. The floor, as you see, is made out of these cobblestones, black and white, typical of the streets of the city. But otherwise, it's a beautiful, beautiful synagogue. And this is the time to acknowledge a fascinating story. There were thousands of Jews who left, taken, I shouldn't say left, the ones who left were very few. Many of them went into Africa, by the way. They went to Congo, to South Africa, some of them. But the ones who were taken almost the entire community. Only 15 people survived from the trip to Poland. But before the Germans would be able to round them up and put them on the boats, here comes this very fine gentleman, the Turkish consul in Rhodes, Mr. Selahaddin Ülkümen. He claimed that the people who were Turkish citizens, 14 of them, actually it meant that not only could they be spared, but their relatives. And that's how he was able to save dozens of other Jews who didn't have Turkish citizenship. He was able to save them. The Germans did not forgive him. And when they came, they started bombing the Turkish consulate, killing his pregnant wife. Luckily, the baby survived. She delivered. It was an incredible story. And this is him in the wedding of his son. He is somebody we cherish very, very much so. We'll go to another Jewish community on another Greek island. This time, let's take the plane for a while. And we come to the island of Zakynthos, another beautiful landscape, very, very interesting little old town with the Jewish synagogue. And when the Germans came here to this town, the priest, the archbishop, and the mayor realized that that means bad news, because by now they know what happened to the Jews in many other places. And they took all the registry and burned down any document that indicated to the fact that there were Jews living in the country. Here we have the Jewish street, and the synagogue does not exist anymore because it was destroyed in 1953. And this is the time to acknowledge this archbishop, which was Chrysostomos, and the mayor, Lucas Carrer. And when the Germans came to them and said, you have to turn all the Jews to us, please make a list. Will come in a couple days, and you have to give us the list of the Jews. And when they came a couple days later, he gave them an envelope. And they opened the envelope, and inside were only two names, his name and the mayor's name. He said, here are your Jews. These are the Jews you required. And there are beautiful books that were written about it. And it's a beautiful, very, very moving story. So here are the pictures of the bishop and the mayor. And they are commemorated throughout the town. And of course, in Israel, the ancient cemetery did not fare very well. I'd like to go for a short while to Kavala, that town in Thrace. Another place where the tragedy took place will be the island of Corfu. And I could take you, here is another one in the synagogue in Corfu, a list of the many Jews who were taken to the camps and perished in the Holocaust. I could do many other communities, but I opted not to. Before we go to the airport, let's go to Athens. And in Athens, we have a very moving memorial. It is designed in the shape of a Star of David, but you see the big pieces are broken and far between. Only the center one is kept, and all the other stones carry on the side of the stones. They carry the names of the towns they face, you see, because it's like a compass. They face in different directions. So here, for example, in Greek, it says Corfu, and then it's Ioannina and Castoria, and so on, the different towns. Another very important person we have to acknowledge is the Archbishop Damaskinos of Athens. And when the Germans threatened to shoot him, look at his answer. According to the traditions of the Greek Orthodox Church, our prelates are hanged, not shot. Please respect our traditions. The guy was willing to pay with his life, only not to cooperate with the Germans. And he encouraged another officer, the director of the police, Angelos Evert, who issued fake documents saying that these people were Christians. Both of them, like many others, of course, are recognized by Yad Vashem, the Holocaust Memorial in Jerusalem, as the righteous among the nations. Here we have the Greek prime minister who found the name of his aunt in the Garden of the Righteous among the nations. Was one of the most moving moments in his life, he said, seeing his auntie's name, honoring and commemorating her noble deed. Another famous person you would know, she is Princess Alice, the mother of the late Prince Philip, husband of Queen Elizabeth. She lived in Athens at the time. She was a nun. And in her position as a nun, she was able to hide Jewish people in her home, and they all survived. So she is also acknowledged, and this is the tree that was planted in her honor in Yad Vashem. Here we have all kinds of exclamations I picked up. For example, the different, now it's not traditional blood libel, so they accuse the Jews of other things, of course, avoiding paying taxes. So here is the response. I'd like to travel now to your country and tell you about what happened when they came to the United States. I find this document to be amazing. They had to declare customs. So look at what here say they received from the Jewish community: a shochet knife and a mohel knife and a mohel scissors. Isn't that an amazing document testifying to the fact that they came into the States? A very interesting synagogue built by the Jews from Ioannina is located now in New York. And it is a very interesting place to go and visit because it also has a small museum next to the synagogue. And those of you who might be in New York, or you can get online, you can see there will be a beautiful ceremony honoring these two people, the mayor and the bishop, and it will be held in, you see, just in a few days, January 25th, Eastern Standard Time, 11 o'clock, and you can join in and see what happens today in the United States in the sense of acknowledging and commemorating these amazing events. Carol, hi Carol, you asked a question, was the synagogue in Rhodes restored? Yes, to a great extent. It was slightly damaged and to a great extent restored to its former beauty. And now if anybody else has any more questions, please go ahead, Karen, and moderate.
Yes, I have them all written, not to worry. Okay, so let me start with the questions that I have written down. The first question is, did they pray in the vernacular? Did people pray in the vernacular?
Yes, they did.
Okay. Were there conflicts between the Romanitic and Sephardic Jews?
Again, the question, what was the?
Were there conflicts between the Romanitic Jews and the Sephardic Jews? And I'm probably pronouncing that wrong.
Yeah, you said it right, Romaniotic Jews. You betcha. Have you ever seen a community which is not going to have disputes and controversies? So in the beginning, they were totally different. The Ashkenazi had their own synagogues and the Romaniotic Jews and the Sephardi. But over the years, they teamed up and even the Ashkenazi Jews learned to speak Ladino and they prayed in the same style. So today we have like the Romaniotic style practiced to make a point, but basically they are all the same.
Great. The Jews of Greece fight partisans against the Nazis when they invaded Greece.
Yes, many Jews participated. Yes, many Jews joined the partisans. And the fact that they were able to join the partisans is because the local populace took them in. Not only the righteous among the nations that we know, but even humble people who didn't know. They heard the bishop asking for the Jews to be sheltered, and they sheltered them in the islands, in the mountains, in the mainland. Absolutely.
Questions about one, how does Greece treat its Jews today, and in relation to anti-Semitism in Greece compared to other European countries?
Unfortunately, I don't know of too many places that do not have anti-Semitism to whatever extent. Even today, the news from France and from various places, not to mention what happened in your country just this past Saturday, as you mentioned, in Texas. But it's not on the same scale as in Hungary, as in Germany, that has a flourishing, terrible, ugly wave of anti-Semitism. But it is there. Yes, it is there.
How many Jews, do we know how many Jews live in Greece today?
We believe about 4,300.
Okay. What happened to the mayor and the bishop?
They survived. They both survived, and they were acknowledged. They were honored and acknowledged by the Jewish people and lots of the Greek people who held them at great esteem.
Great. Can you name the city again that had the monasteries on the mountaintop?
Meteora. Meteora. It's not a city, it's like a region, it's a location, Meteora.
Okay. So maybe we can Google that and drop it in the chat. That's what I have. How do we contact Jacob? We will give his email. Can we put his email? And you want your email, Jacob, for contact?
With pleasure. Thank you.
Okay. Can you put the slide up again with the information for the 25th so people can write that down? Because a lot of people were asking about that. Yeah, so you don't see, is there
if you look up this community, you'll be able to get, because they're the one putting it up. The Kehila Kedosha Ioannina, yes.
Okay, so you have to Google this Kehila Kedosha.
Yeah.
And then get the information off of their website. So just take note of that, and then get information off of that website. Okay, so here's a question I'm just going to read. What happened to people sent to Poland who had to buy their own ticket to go there if they could not afford to buy the ticket?
Oh, they were sent anyhow. They were sent anyhow. After they got the money from the people, you know, they were so vicious, they were so mean the deceit was so deep that, for example, in Holland, for example, you could choose whether you want to ride coach or first class. Can you imagine? People would pay more to ride first class. Of course, at the end, everybody was shoved into the same kettle cars. So after they got their money and gave them supposedly this ticket, everybody was pushed into the same cars anyhow.
Do we know who took those photos that were so,
The Germans took it. A German soldier took these photos, and they were discovered only years later.
Yeah. Terrible. Yeah, Depo, your emails. Percentage-wise, did Greece help its Jews more during the Nazi time? And if so, why do you think that was?
The Greeks helped and the Italians helped. You see, that is amazing. Most of Greece was occupied by Italy, and as long as the Italians were there, the Jews were not harmed. It was only when Germany occupied Italy and subsequently occupied the territories that were kept by Italy in Greece that the Jews were harmed. I don't know to tell you why did some people do whatever they did. I don't know if it was not thanks to their leaders, whether it was the mayor or the bishop or some heads of the church. You know, in neighboring Bulgaria, which is worthwhile looking it up, not only a few thousand Jews, 55,000 Jews of Bulgaria were all saved by the Bulgarian people. The heads of the church, the two major heads of the church, said to the priests in the countryside, if the trains will come to remove the Jews, you will lie down on the tracks and you will not let them take the Jews. And the trains came and they left empty. Imagine, from Athens, the trains, or for example, from the boats that came to different islands, the ones who ended up using the boats, they sent big boats to take the Jews away. The ones who were taken were the Germans at the end because they were losing the war, and so on. So it's very difficult to say which one was which. I see that Alan says he traveled with the Kehila Kedosha Ioannina on a tour of Jewish Greece. I think that is so wonderful.
Wow.
And yes, and the relations between Greece and Israel are absolutely fantastic. And thanks everybody for your kind words.
Yes, really nice. I think Joshua Fogel would like to share an interesting custom on his trip to Athens many years ago in a synagogue.
Please.
So I will ask you to unmute, Joshua.
Okay, and I'll put my video on also. One moment here. Hold on.
Great.
So I actually lived in Baltimore many years ago, and I just saw this recently. It's my first time I ever went to. I'm a college professor, so I'm between semesters, so I'm able to attend. Here's the custom. So I'm an Orthodox Jewish person, and I have yeshiva background, and I was on a tour to Athens. So I went to the synagogue there, and they came over to me and they said to me, by the Torah reading, Yachol Krot, meaning, are you able to read? So I know in the Ashkenazic and typical services, typically we do not read. The cantor or someone designated reads the Torah portion, not yourselves. But I thought they must have known, I have no idea, they must have known that I'm Orthodox Jewish, I'm very learned, I'm a guest, so they asked me to read. So I read. Now the tune that they sing in Athens is different from the typical Ashkenazic reading, and I also didn't prepare. I mean, I can read Hebrew pretty well, but it would have helped had they let me know the day before, which they didn't know in that sense. And then afterwards I noticed no one else read there. So I went over to one of the guys who spoke English, and I asked, what's going on? He goes, oh, the custom is in Athens, we ask you, can you read? The custom is also to politely decline. I didn't know that. So I just thought they knew I must have been learned to read it. But that was my interesting experience in Athens. Everyone else was asked the same thing in Cholakrot. I heard a couple ask, and they didn't read it. I go, what's going on? And then he explained, that's the custom that we ask, but then you also decline. And I didn't know that. So that
did you end up reading?
What?
Did you end up reading?
No, I read it. That's the point. I read my Aliyah. I read my Torah portion. And no one else did afterwards. And only either the cantor or rabbi read it. So I asked, what's going on? Why they ask me? And the other Torah people that were Shomer Shabbat also there. So he explained the custom is we ask you to read. Part of the custom is you're supposed to decline.
That's funny.
That was my experience in the synagogue.
Well, now all 700 of us know to say no thanks. We'll decline.
I'd like
tip.
to answer. I'd like to answer Sid Mint's
Thank you.
question. Why was such a high percentage of the Jews in Greece lost in the Holocaust? You see, I cannot say because of the rabbi, but that didn't help. You see, there were other rabbis in other locations who say to the Jews, run away, hide, wherever you can. And some of them said, I think we'd better oblige. We have good chances to help ourselves if we cooperate with them and if we oblige and obey their orders and instructions. Yeah.
Yes, I don't think I have any more questions. Adi, do you have it? Do you see any more?
I have a question here by
Oh, you do?
Glenda.
Okay, you must be getting your own questions.
Yeah, I
then,
get
Jacob.
some of them sent to
Okay.
me directly. So Glenda,
Okay.
I don't know about the story. The place where they tied Jews together and shot them into the water was in Budapest. I don't know that such a thing happened in Greece. I will definitely look it up.
Great. So this was amazing as usual. I'm so glad that we did this. We had a great turnout and I think it was wonderful and enjoyable. Do we have anything else to add, Jacob, before we go?
There was another question about the Italians. I don't want to open another story because for the longest time, the Jewish people have been very upset with the conduct of the Pope during the Holocaust for his silence. Today, we have reason to believe that the amazing story of the rescue of Italian Jews and Jews that were saved where Italians were could not have happened without very, very clear, not just endorsement, probably instructions given from the highest windows in the Vatican. So it could be, we don't know, it is a subject of another conversation, but we have reason to believe that, it was thanks to very high-ranking officials in the church that have somehow trickled down the instructions. You see, saving the Jews in monasteries and private houses and churches could not have happened without generous help and significant help with food and supplies. The other question that Roslyn asked was, do we know approximately how many Jews followed Shabtai Tzvi and became Muslims? Can you imagine? We have reason to believe today that maybe 20% of the Turkish population, 20%, could somehow be related to the people who followed Shabtai Tzvi. So when he was still around, and after he died, for many, many years after he died, before many people were disillusioned, the number was significant. We lost, that we know of, we lost tens of thousands, but by significant number, this was so many centuries ago, the damage inflicted on us by Shabtai Tzvi is even then what the Cossacks did, Khmelnytsky in Ukraine and in Poland and so on and so on. Yes, it was a significant loss, significant damage, yes.
Did children attend Jewish schools by synagogues, or do they now?
Now, not really. Not really. They have like Sunday school framework, but before the Holocaust, many of them did, even though it cost money where you could go to public school and that was for free, but many Jews preferred to pay and send their children to Jewish education. My goodness, I see that Diane Hershkovitz, who was with me on the trip March of the Living, is here. Hi, Diane. Thank you so much for joining, and thank you everybody else for joining and for your kind words and questions. And you have my email address, and if anybody will have any additional comments or questions, please do not hesitate.
Yes, please email me and email Jacob, and I always get the messages to Jacob in a timely manner. So and he responds in a very timely manner. So thank you all so much for being here with us today. We are so appreciative of you sharing our information, sharing our Zooms, and all your sponsorships and donations. We couldn't do this without you. Thank you so much, Jacob, for staying up late with us and being here, Israel time, and always making the time to be with us. Thank you so much. And we will see you next week. Next week is Thursday, right, Adi, instead of Tuesday? No, we have Tuesday too. Okay, so Adi, let's, hi Adi, come on screen with us and correct me.
Next week
where
we're
did
gonna
you
go to next week we're gonna go to Jewish India.
Oh, right. Next week we're going to Jewish India, which is supposed to be fascinating. Namaste and Shalom in Jewish India. But on Thursday we have an event too? No, I'm wrong. Yes, I'm right. Okay. So next week on Tuesday at 11, we're going to Jewish India. And then on Thursday, on Tuesday, we're going to Jewish India. And Thursday, we're going to visit Yad Vashem in remembrance of International Holocaust Remembrance Day. So 2 events in 1 week. How we pull it off, we have no idea. Yes, Jacob.
One more comment. My good friend Rosa, who comes from Athens and has her family there, has asked me to mention something which I should have, is the Lauder Foundation Jewish School in Athens, which has, of course, lots of non-Jewish students, but the Jewish kids, they are very active in many, many different fields dealing with refugee issues and so on and so on. So that's something that I should have mentioned. Absolutely. Thank you, Rosa.
Great. And my dad just messaged me that we're going to go to Greece soon. So we shall all go together with Jacob. And yeah, that's definitely on my bucket list to go to Greece. So we will make that happen. So thank you so much all for being here. We will be in touch. We will see you next Tuesday. Have a great day. Hopefully it's warmer than 10 degrees. And see you next Tuesday. Email us, call us, stop by the office. We will see you soon. Have a great day, everybody. Bye.
Shalom, shalom.
Bye,
Shalom,
Jacob.
shalom.
Thank you so much. Shalom.